गुड मॉर्निंग स्टूडेंट्स। कैसे हैं आप सब लोग स्टूडेंट्स? आपकी तैयारी कैसी चल रही है? सो हाउ आर यू गाइस? सो स्टूडेंट्स, वी आर नियरिंग completion of this chapter 4, that is audit evidence. And today we shall be doing topic of audit sampling in context of essay 530. So this is the last remaining essay of this chapter which is pending. So today, students, we shall be learning about the meaning of audit sampling. What are the various terms associated with it, and what consideration auditor keeps in his mind while he selects a sample. How he selects a sample, what factors affect sample size, and if he finds some misstatement, how it is dealt with, how he evaluates the results. So all these things uh, we shall be dealing with today. Yes. Namaste, Suman Goelji. You are saying preparation is going good. That's fine. Keep it up, Suman Goelji. So students, first of all, we shall try to understand the various terms associated with audit sampling as contained in essay 530. And I have prepared a brief summary of all the terms and important points of essay 530, which is already uploaded. So you can see that also. So today we shall be going through this summary which I have prepared, and thereafter we shall be going through your module also. So students, while designing tests of controls and tests of details, auditor has three options. Now he can either engage in 100% verification while selecting items for testing. He may choose to select 100% of the items. Say if he is uh, testing transactions pertaining to sales, he may choose to verify 100% of items. Nothing stops him from verifying 100% of items. Say, and auditor does this in many cases. Say when there are when there are small number of items but which are of large values. Say if in the sales account total sales are of rupees 5 crores and there are say only 30 invoices which make up these rupees 5 crores. So the auditor may decide, he may choose that I will verify all these 30 items which make up the sale transactions because the items are limited in number. So this could be one of the reason. Or auditor may choose some items selectively. Say he may choose some items depending upon the risk of material misstatement, or he may choose some items due to their very nature, or he may choose some items beyond a certain threshold limit. But students, you have to understand that this selective testing is not sampling. So in this case, the auditor is choosing items, he is testing items selectively. But this is not sampling. Sampling is something else. Or he may rely upon audit sampling, which we shall be studying today in context of Essay 530. Okay, clear students? So while designing tests of controls and tests of details, the auditor may choose to do 100% of verification, or he may choose selective testing, or he may rely upon audit sampling. So students, we shall see what is the meaning of audit sampling. So students, first of all, we shall be gaining understanding of the important terms from this summary which has been prepared, and it is already uploaded on the portal. So what is audit sampling, students? The application of audit procedures to less than 100% of items within a population of audit relevance, such that all the sampling units have a chance of selection, in order to provide the auditor with reasonable basis on which to draw conclusions about the whole population. So students, you have to remember that distinguishing feature of audit sampling is, number one, that auditor applies audit procedures to less than 100% of populations. So this is the logic behind audit samplings, that he does not check 100% of the items. And second thing is that that this is done in a way that all the items within that population have a chance of being selected. They have a probability of being selected. Say when I choose an audit sample, say in respect of sales transactions, then all the, say, 10,000 entries which are making up the sales account, there is a probability that any of them can be selected. And third most important distinguishing feature of audit sampling is that the result of sample can be projected to whole of the population. So whatever the conclusions auditor is drawing on the basis of samples, he can form his conclusion regarding the whole population on the basis of his sample results. Say if he has taken a sample of 100 invoices out of 1,000, out of say 10,000 sales invoices, Then after evaluating the results of sample of 100 invoices, he can form opinion about the whole of the sales transactions, about whole of the 10,000 transactions. So you understand, guys, the meaning of audit sampling? Yes, Devraj, this is this we are learning not from your module, but from summary which I have uploaded and which is available in your ID. Okay. So after understanding all this, we shall also go to your module. So if you have not downloaded it, or you are not in a position to download it right now, then just try to understand what we are trying to learn. So students, you have understood the meaning of audit sampling. So three important features of audit sampling are that audit procedures are applied to less than 100% of population. Not every item is checked, this you know. This general meaning of audit sampling you know already. By your common sense, you know what is sample. And second thing is that all the items have a chance of selection. There is no bias. All the items have a chance of selection. कौन सा इनवॉइस सैंपल में आ जाएगा, इसमें कोई बायस नहीं है ऑडिटर का. ओके. एंड थर्ड इज that the sample, that the conclusions which the auditor would be getting from the sample, these can be extrapolated to the whole of the population uh, by testing the sample. The auditor can form a conclusion about the whole of the population from which sample is drawn. Yes. सो स्टूडेंट्स, आपको ऑडिट सैंपलिंग का मीनिंग क्लियर है, इसके फीचर्स क्लियर है. सो SA 530 applies when the auditor has decided to use audit sampling for performing audit procedures. So SA 530 only applies when the auditor has decided to use audit sampling for performing audit procedures. So obviously, since it is since the requirements of audit sampling would only apply when the auditor has decided to choose audit sampling for performing audit procedures. If he has decided to verify 100% of the item, then requirements of SA 530 do not apply. Clear, guys? And what is population, students? Population means the entire set of data from which sample is selected. Say, like we were talking about sales. So if there are 10,000 entries which make up an sale account, and the auditor is checking a sample of 100, so 10,000 is the population number. 10,000 is the population from which sample of 100 is drawn. Okay. So students, as you remember that in chapter 3, we had learnt about detection risk. Remember? detection risk, and we had also learned that detection risk consists of two components. One is sampling risk and one is non-sampling risk. So students, you remember the meaning of detection risk? So detection risk is the chance that that the procedures performed by the auditor will not be able to detect a material misstatement. कि ऑडिटर प्रोसीजर्स जो कर रहा है लेकिन फिर भी चांस है कि कोई मटेरियल मिसस्टेटमेंट वो अनडिटेक्टेड रह जाए, वो ना ढूंढ पाए. सो दिस इज कॉल्ड एज डिटेक्शन रिस्क. द रिस्क ऑफ नॉट डिटेक्टिंग, the probability of not detecting, the chance of not detecting material misstatement, even though auditor has performed the audit procedures. So we had learned in chapter 3, guys, that detection risks consists of two components. What are these two components? These components are sampling risk and non-sampling risk. So at that time also we had understood the meaning of sampling risk and non-sampling risk. So we shall be again going through the meaning of sampling risk and non-sampling risk, although in more detailed way today. Okay, so what is sampling risk, students? Agar, if students, if I take some sample, then what risk do I have? I have a risk that sample may not be representative completely, that the conclusion which is being drawn by me on the basis of sample, this may not be applicable to the entire population. So if I had checked all the items falling within the population, comprising within the population, then my conclusions may have been different from the conclusions which I am drawing on the basis of sample. So this is known as sampling risk, students. And sampling risk, as you know, it will always be there. It is a component of detection risk and it will always be there. This much probability will always be there. Like many surveys you hear about, so they have a margin of error. So you can correlate it that way. Okay. So students, if there is sampling risk, when there is sampling risk, it can lead to two types of erroneous conclusions. What is erroneous? Erroneous means wrongful. Full of errors, you can say, which are wrong. So it can lead to two types of erroneous conclusions. Now, what are these conclusions, students? Yes, guys. So sampling risk can lead to two types of wrongful conclusions. Because of the presence of sampling risk, the auditor can arrive at two types of erroneous conclusions. Now, one conclusion relates to audit effectiveness. One type of wrong conclusion can relate to audit effectiveness, and another type of wrong conclusion, another type of erroneous conclusion can relate to audit efficiency. Now we will see what does this mean. Say students, if the auditor concludes, say in case of tests of controls, that controls are operating effectively, where whereas actually these are not. So the auditor, on the basis of sample, say if he concludes that controls are operating effectively, but actually these are not operating effectively. So he is arriving at a wrong conclusion on the basis of sample. So ultimately, it would impact his audit effectiveness, and he may give an inappropriate opinion because he has wrongly relied that controls were operating effectively, but actually these are not. Or in case of tests of details, he may conclude that that there are no misstatements, that there are no material misstatements. Whereas actually there are material misstatements. So what would happen? He would give inappropriate audit opinion. So this would impact his audit effectiveness. So clear, students? Now what happens if opposite of this takes place? Say if the auditor wrongly concludes that controls are not operating effectively, whereas actually these are operating. So students, try to understand. Now, the auditor in second situation, he concludes on the basis of sample that controls are not operating effectively. But in reality, but actually controls are operating effectively. Or say in case of tests of details, he wrongly concludes, he erroneously concludes that there are misstatements in material misstatements in financial statements, whereas actually there are no such material misstatements. So what impact would it have? So what impact would it have? It would have impact upon his audit efficiency. It would have impact on his audit efficiency because he has wrongly arrived at some conclusion which was incorrect. So uska काम बढ़ जाएगा. It would lead to duplicacy of work because somewhere down the line he would realize that his initial conclusions were incorrect. So it would impact his audit efficiency. So students, you have to understand these both type of conclusions these both type of erroneous conclusions properly, and these are the result of the sampling risk. So sampling risk can lead to these two type of erroneous, wrongful conclusions. Yes, students, is the point clear to you? Yes, students, is the point clear to you? So this summary, students, which we are going through is prepared from your module itself. So it is not that something else is written in this summary. This is based upon your module. So all these points are in your module. So in case of a test of controls, so we are talking about two types of erroneous conclusions. In case of test of controls, he may conclude that controls are more effective than they actually are. Or in case of test of details, a material misstatements does not exist when in fact it does. So the auditor is primarily concerned with this type of erroneous conclusion because it affects effectiveness and it is likely to lead to inappropriate audit opinion. So the point to remember is erroneous, that he is concluding in a wrong manner. He is concluding erroneously that there are no misstatements, whereas misstatements are present. So obviously, it would impact his opinion. He may give an inappropriate opinion. Or if he finds that controls are perfectly fine, these are effective, but actually these are not effective, so then it also leads to inappropriate opinion. And second type of erroneous conclusion is that controls are less effective than these are actually are. So this is opposite of first point. So he wrongly concludes that controls are less effective than they actually are. So actually controls are okay, actually controls are perfectly fine. These are working effectively, but auditor wrongly concludes that controls are less effective. Or in case of tests of details, he concludes that a material misstatement exists, that a misstatement is there in the sample, but actually there is no material misstatements. So what it would lead to? It would lead to an impact on audit efficiency. उसको कई काम उसको दोबारा करने पड़ेंगे because whatever the initial conclusions he has arrived on the basis of samples are incorrect. क्योंकि वो जब दूसरे प्रोसीजर्स कुछ लगाएगा तो उसको पता चलेगा कि जो उसने उसकी इनिशियल फाइंडिंग्स थी दीज वर इनकरेक्ट, सो इट वुड हैव इम्पैक्ट अपॉन हिज ऑडिट एफिशिएंसी. यस, clear students? So when you read it once or twice, you would get more clarity. When you would try to establish these things in your mind by reading from module, you would get more clarity. Okay. So non-sampling risk. What is non-sampling risk, students? Now this we already did in chapter 3. So the risk that the auditor reaches an erroneous conclusion for any reason not related to sampling risk. So like the auditor performs some inappropriate audit procedure. जिस चीज को ऑडिटर टेस्ट कर रहा है उसने कोई और प्रोसीजर उसको चाहिए था यूज करना, लेकिन उसने कोई गलत प्रोसीजर यूज किया, तो इसमें सैंपल की तो कोई गलती नहीं है ना. इट हैज नथिंग टू डू विथ सैंपल. इट was wrong on the part of auditor to apply that procedure at first place. Okay, से जैसे फिजिकल इन्वेंट्री काउंट, किसी इन्वेंट्री की एग्जिस्टेंस का एविडेंस लेने के लिए उसको फिजिकल इन्वेंट्री काउंट अटेंड करना जरूरी है, एंड he has to observe how counting is being carried out. So if he does not adopt this procedure, he applies some another procedure to gain satisfaction regarding this, then there is a risk that he would arrive at some inappropriate conclusion. So this is non-sampling risk. Or another example of non-sampling risk is like he has taken a sample and he is evaluating the results of sample, but he has missed some important points from the results of the sample, or he has not evaluated the results of sample in proper way. Say sample is giving a picture, sample is pointing out something, but the auditor has failed to take notice of those things. So इसमें भी sample की क्या गलती है? So this is again an example of non-sampling risk. Okay. Clear, students? Non-sampling risk is clear. Now sampling unit. So individual items जो population में है वो sampling unit है. जैसे अगर मैं कोई अकाउंट बैलेंसेस 100 अकाउंट बैलेंसेस हैं, तो डिफरेंट उसमें सैम्पलिंग यूनिट क्या हो सकते हैं? अकाउंट बैलेंसेस भी हो सकते हैं, उसमें सेल्स इनवॉइसेस भी हो सकते हैं. सो दीज आर ऑल सैम्पलिंग यूनिट्स. सो अनदर थिंग इज टॉलरेबल रेट ऑफ डेविएशन. सो स्टूडेंट्स, अब इसमें आपको दो चीजों में डिस्टिंग्विश करना है. These two things you have to keep in your mind always. That tolerable rate of deviation is a term used in the context of tests of controls. Whereas another term, tolerable misstatement, this term is used in context of tests of details. सो जब हम डेविएशन की बात करते हैं तो हम कंट्रोल्स की बात करते हैं. व्हेन वी टॉक अबाउट डेविएशन, we talk about deviations from established controls, deviations from the controls which have been set up by the management as part of its control process. Okay, so what is tolerable rate of deviation? So students, tolerable rate of deviation simply means that the rate of deviation with which auditor is comfortable with it. Say students, I am testing a control. Say before testing a control, I feel that if I find deviation of 2%, it is perfectly fine for me. It is not going to my conclusions being inappropriate. So if I am testing a control and I find that 2% of deviation is okay, 2% of deviation is fine, then this is tolerable rate of deviation. I can tolerate this. And what is actual rate of deviation? Actual rate of deviation is when I actually test that sample, then what is the actual rate of deviation? So if the actual rate of deviation is more than tolerable rate of deviation, it would mean that that controls are not operating effectively. Then control risk would be greater, and area of substantive testing would have to be increased. Student, see, understand it from this example. An auditor tests sample of 100 purchase invoices for and these invoices are approved by some competent person. So he is testing that whether purchase invoices received are first of all approved or not. So he finds that out of 100 sample invoices verified, 7 were not approved. Say earlier, he had set up a tolerable rate of deviation at 3%. But what is now? After testing, actually, he finds that rate of deviation is 7%. So actual rate of deviation is 7% and tolerable rate is 3%. So actual rate is greater than tolerable rate. So therefore, increased substantive testing would be required. He may not like to place reliance on the controls based upon his sample checking. So you understand, students, what we mean by tolerable rate of deviation. It has to be understood by comparing it with actual rate of deviation. It has not to be understood in isolation. It has to be understood by comparing its meaning with actual rate of deviation. So clear, guys? So tolerable rate of deviation means a rate of deviation from prescribed internal control procedures. Now, this is very important, students. Tolerable rate of deviation is always used, this term is always used in the context of controls, not in the context of misstatements. So when we talk about controls, we talk about deviations. Okay, and when we talk about tests of details, we talk about misstatements. And remember, misstatements are in monetary amounts. So this is the important distinction between the two. So rate of deviation, tolerable rate of deviation, all these terms are used in the context of controls. When we talk about controls, when we talk about tests of controls, these terms are used. Clear, students? So tolerable rate of deviation means a rate of deviation from prescribed internal control procedures set by the auditor. कि जो इंटरनल कंट्रोल कंपनी ने बनाया है उसमें से कितना डेविएट कर रहे हैं, कितना वो चीज फॉलो नहीं हो रही. ओके, in respect of which auditor seeks to obtain an appropriate level of assurance that rate of deviation set by the auditor is not exceeded by the actual rate of deviation in the population. So the auditor tries to gain comfort. He tries to gain assurance that actual rate of deviation is not more than the tolerable rate of deviation with which he was comfortable. Okay. So you understand meaning of tolerable rate of deviation? And this example is also clear to you. Say, I initially assumed a tolerable rate of deviation with which I am comfortable with, say at 3%. I assumed that if controls are not followed up to 3% in this particular aspect, even then it is okay. हो सकता है गलती हो गई हो, that this much I am comfortable with. But say actually when I am testing it, I find that it is more than 3%. So then it would be warning signal for me. I would have to increase my area of substantive checking, and I may not place reliance on controls. Okay. Yes, students, clear? And what is tolerable misstatement, students? Now, misstatements is used, the term misstatement is used in the context of tests of details. सो कंट्रोल्स के, जब हम कंट्रोल्स की बात करते हैं तो हम डेविएशन की बात करते हैं. जब हम टेस्ट ऑफ डिटेल्स की बात करते हैं तो हम मिस स्टेटमेंट की बात करते हैं. तो इसमें हम बात करते हैं टॉलरेबल मिस स्टेटमेंट की. तो स्टूडेंट्स, व्हाट इज टॉलरेबल मिस स्टेटमेंट? सो सबसे पहली बात तो ये है स्टूडेंट्स कि टॉलरेबल मिस स्टेटमेंट का डिस्टिंग्विशिंग फीचर है मॉनिटरी अमाउंट. इट इज ऑलवेज इन एन अमाउंट. It is always in a monetary amount. It is always set in a figure. So जैसी टॉलरेबल रेट ऑफ डेविएशन की डेफिनेशन है, वैसी ही टॉलरेबल मिसस्टेटमेंट की डेफिनेशन है. So if I find some misstatement actually in a sample which is exceeded by tolerable misstatement, then I am not getting comfort. So tolerable misstatement is a monetary amount set by the auditor in respect of which the auditor seeks to obtain an appropriate level of assurance that monetary amount set by the auditor is not exceeded by the actual misstatement in the population. So I would always want to see that the actual misstatement is not more than the tolerable misstatement, because tolerable misstatement is the amount which I can tolerate, with which I am comfortable with. So this is called tolerable misstatement. Say we try to study it with an example. So students, try to see this example. say sample of 50 sales invoices is tested by an auditor. And total of 50 sales invoices is 50,000. The auditor is verifying 50 sample sales invoices and total of all those 50 sales invoices is say 50,000. And he finds that 3 invoices recorded wrongly, leading to misstatement of rupees 1800. So he was checking a sample of 50 invoices whose total was 50,000. In 3 invoices, he finds that there is a misstatement of rupees 1800. 3 invoices में मिला के amount जो गलत लिखा हुआ है that is 1800. And assume total sales during year are say rupees 1 crore. He has fixed tolerable misstatement of say rupees 3 lakhs. So what he would do, he would extrapolate this this misstatement which he has found in the sample to the whole of the population. So 3 invoices में students उसको what misstatement did he find? He find misstatement of 1800. And what was the value of these invoices? 50,000. And what is the total sales value? 1 crore. So this is the actual misstatement after extrapolation. So he finds in the sample that there was a misstatement of 1800. Now he is trying to project this misstatement in the complete sales population. So after projecting it, he finds that this misstatement comes to 3,60,000. Tolerable misstatement say was earlier set by him at 3 lakh. So in this case, actual misstatement is more than tolerable misstatement. So therefore, he is not getting a confidence. So he would try to increase his sample size and see what are the results. And if the results are again the same, then he would ask the management to investigate the matter and to make adjustment for these misstatements. And if the management doesn't make such adjustments, then obviously it would have impact on his opinion. So this is the concept of tolerable misstatement. So remember that tolerable misstatement is always set in a monetary amount. ये एक figure की it is set in a figure. It is set in monetary amount. Okay. So as compared to tolerable rate of deviation, because there we were talking about controls. Here we are talking about actual figures, actual errors, actual misstatements. Clear, students? So tolerable misstatement is a monetary amount set by the auditor in respect of which the auditor seeks to obtain an appropriate level of assurance that the monetary amount set by him is not exceeded by the actual misstatement in the population. So he tries to get a comfort. The auditor tries to get an assurance that actual misstatement is not more than tolerable misstatement. So the meaning of the tolerable misstatement, students, it has also to be understood in the vis-a-vis in the context of actual misstatement. Like in case of tolerable rate of deviation, we had tried to understand its meaning by comparing it with actual rate of deviation. Similarly, in case of tolerable misstatement also, we try to understand its meaning by comparing its meaning with actual misstatement. Yes. Yes, guys, clear? Yeah, yes, and one term is anomaly, students. What is anomaly? Anomaly means which is something inconsistent. Outlier, which is not representative of the population. Say, students, while testing a control, say the auditor finds that a certain report which is generated on every day is not being generated, is not generated on a particular day. So he finds that this report was not generated because of some system issues. There was some server problem, but on every day it is being generated. So this is an example of anomaly. So which may not be representative of the deviations in the population. So it is happening due to something extra. It is an aberration. Okay, clear, students? So another term is, students, stratification. So first of all, students, we are trying to understand these terms because in SA 530, in the remaining part, these terms are being used. So what is stratification? So stratification means, students, breaking up of something. Like breaking up of a data into distinct groups. Like say, in normal course, we say that we stratify the population of the country by age. So how many people are there between 0 to 5, between 5 to 15, say, between 16 to 25, and so on. So breaking up of some data into distinct layers, into different stratums. So these layers are called as stratums. Okay. This process is known as stratification. So when we similarly in auditing, while sampling, if you break some data, if you stratify some data, before a sample is selected, you stratify the data into certain distinct groups. So it is called as stratification. Okay. like say say students, if I have debtors say ranging from rupees 1000 to say rupees 20 lakhs. So if I am having trade receivables ranging from rupees 1000 to 20 lakh, say I may stratify trade receivables like between 1000 to 99,000, and say between 1 lakh to 5 lakh, say 5 lakh 1 to 6 lakh, sorry 10 lakh, say 10 lakh 1 to 15 lakhs, and 15 lakh 1 to 20 lakh. So this is an example of stratification. So what I am doing, I am dividing the data, I am stratifying the data into certain distinct groups. So this is known as stratification. So how is it helpful, students? So if I stratify the data, so obviously I would be choosing more representative samples, because say between 1 to 99,000 I would be choosing some sample, between this group I would be choosing sample, and between this group also I would be choosing sample. So I am choosing samples from all the groups. Whereas if I do not stratify the data, the possibility is that I may skip some important samples. So therefore, we say that stratification helps in improving audit efficiency. Okay, so the audit efficiency may be improved if the auditor stratifies a population, dividing it into discrete subpopulations which have an identifying characteristics. So again, students, we learn the meaning of stratification. It is the process of dividing a population into subpopulations, which each of which is a group of sampling units which have similar characteristics, often of monetary value. So obviously, data of monetary value is generally stratified. Data containing monetary values, containing figures, is generally stratified. So it is useful in considering characteristics of the population from which the sample will be drawn. So it is useful in tests of details, while when performing tests of details, the population is often stratified by monetary value. So this allows greater audit effort to be directed at large value of items. Say when you stratify the data, students, then you know that which are the large items. So the auditor may choose to check say 75% of such items, large value items, and he may check only say 20% of low value items. So therefore, Stratification allows greater audit effort to be directed at large value items as these may contain the greatest potential of misstatement. So, जो high value ABC analysis, this you are all aware about. So, same concept. Okay, students. So, you understand meaning of stratification, students? Yes. Now we come to requirements of SA 530. All these definitions, students, these are also part of SA 530. These have been defined in SA 530 pertaining to audit sampling. So SA 530 talks about sample design, size, sample size, and selection of items for testing. So three things it talks about. Number one is sample design, number two is sample size, and number three is selection of items for testing. So how the sample is to be designed? So obviously the auditor would see what is the purpose to be achieved by testing the sample, which assertion he is testing. So that would be one of the foremost considerations in sample design. Clear, students? So when designing an audit sample, consider the specific purpose to be achieved and whether some other audit procedure is also to be applied in combination with that is also to be seen. So consideration of the nature of audit evidence sought and possible deviation or misstatement conditions relating to that audit evidence will assist the auditor in defining what constitutes a deviation or misstatement. So general thing that while designing an audit sample, the auditor has to keep in mind the assertion which he is testing, the purpose for which evidence is to be obtained, and what other procedures are being performed in relation to that assertion which is being tested. So it may also have an impact upon the sample design. So all these factors impact sample design. Yes. And sample size. So कितना बड़ा sample size होना चाहिए? Now it depends upon many things. How large or how small enough a sample should be. So sample size SA 530 says that sample size should be sufficient to reduce sampling risk to acceptably low level. So obviously the auditor would always like to reduce sampling risk to a low level. He won't require that sampling risk is more because it can lead to him expressing an inappropriate opinion, either in tests of controls or in tests of details. So therefore, he has to determine a sample size which is sufficient to reduce sampling risk to an acceptably low level. So if the auditor wants to keep the sampling risk at low level, then what would be its impact on size? Yes, students. If the auditor is wanting to keep the sampling risk at low level, then what would be its impact on sample size? Yes. So the sample size would be greater because he is not willing to take the chance. He is not willing to take the risk. So he wants that my sample size would be greater because I want to keep the sampling risk low. Okay. So how to determine sample size, students? Sample size can be determined depending upon the professional judgment of auditor or on the basis of some statistical formula. So there are different formulas in statistics for determining sample size. So the auditor can use those formulas, or he can decide sample size on the basis of his professional judgment. Both are fine. Both things are okay. Both things are in accordance with SA 530. So many factors affect sample size, students. For example, in case of tests of controls, an increase in division lead to what? It would lead to decrease in sample size. Say if earlier I had set a tolerable rate of deviation at 5%, and say now I am setting tolerable rate of deviation at 10%, then obviously it would lead to decrease in my sample size because now I am comfortable with 10% of deviations. So it would lead to decrease in sample size. Or say conversely, if I want more assurance that my tolerable rate of deviation doesn't exceed actual rate of deviation, then I would increase my sample size because I want more assurance that my tolerable rate of deviation is not more is not exceeded by actual rate of deviation. I want more comfort that actual rate of deviation is less than tolerable rate of deviation. Then obviously I would be increasing my sample size. I would be checking more. I would be taking a larger sample. Okay. Yes, clear, guys. So similarly, in case of tests of details, an increase in tolerable misstatement would lead to decrease of sample size. Like same as in case of test of controls, and as in case of tests of controls, an increase in tolerable rate of deviation would lead to decrease in sample size. Similarly, in case of tests of details, an increase in tolerable misstatement would lead to decrease in sample size. Because now I am more comfortable with, say, earlier I was comfortable with a misstatement of 1 lakh. Now I am comfortable with, say, a misstatement of 1,50,000 or 2 lakh. So obviously it would lead to decrease in sample size. Now I would need lesser items. Okay. And similarly, if I want more comfort, that tolerable misstatement uh, is is not exceeded by actual misstatement. that actual misstatement remains below tolerable misstatement, then obviously if this expectation is increased, then it would lead to increase of sample size. Increase of sample size. Now, selection of items for testing. Now, the students, the auditor has to select items for testing so that each sampling unit has a chance of selection. He is not to be biased. Each item has a chance of selection. So, in this context, the auditor may use statistical sampling or non-statistical sampling. So SA 530 says that auditor can use statistical sampling or non-statistical sampling. Both are okay. Both are perfectly fine, and these are in accordance with SA 530. Although statistical sampling has some advantages, like it is more scientific, it is based upon statistical proven formulas, and it helps in objectivity. It removes bias, but SA 530 doesn't look down upon the professional judgment of auditor. He gives it gives SA 530 gives equal importance to the professional judgment of the auditor also. So the auditor may use either statistical sampling or non-statistical sampling. Okay, so both are perfectly fine. So what is statistical sampling, students? It is an approach to sampling that has two characteristics. So what are these two characteristics of statistical sampling, guys? These are random selection of sample items and the use of probability theory to evaluate sample results, including measurement of sampling risks. So when an auditor selects samples randomly, and the randomly means not dependent on the auditor's judgment. Randomly means by using say random number generators, or by using random number tables. So there are random number tables, students, which contain a lot of random numbers, and random number generators are software which produce random numbers by using algorithms. So randoms, the key features of statistical sampling are random selection of sample items and use of probability theory to evaluate sample results. So whatever result he has got from his samples, he has to make use of probability theory to evaluate the same. So this is called as statistical sampling. And any approach which doesn't have both these features, both these, so that approach is called as non-statistical sampling. Clear, students? So statistical sampling has two distinguishing features. One feature is random selection of samples, and another is use of probability theory to evaluate sample results. So if a sampling approach doesn't have both of these features, then it is known as non-statistical sampling. So a sampling approach that doesn't have characteristics both 1 and 2 is considered non-statistical sampling. So as I have told you guys, both these approaches are appropriate. Both these approaches are fine as far as auditor is concerned. The point is that in both the cases, in statistical sampling as well as in non-statistical sampling, bias is to be avoided, because the purpose of sampling is to provide a reasonable basis for auditor to draw conclusions. So it is important that auditor selects a representative sample so that bias is avoided by choosing sample items which have characteristics typical of that population. So the auditor, how bias can be avoided, students? Say if the auditor uses his professional judgment to select certain items for sample, say, then he can avoid bias by say he would be promoting bias. Let us understand it in this way. He would be promoting bias if he say chooses to ignore some difficult items. Okay, or if he chooses items in such a way that have a truly predictable pattern, like he always chooses first sale invoice of a month and last sales invoice of a month. So this is promoting bias. This is not avoiding bias. So he has to choose the items in a way that bias is avoided, in a truly random way. In a truly random way. Okay. So now we come to methods of selecting samples. Now, how samples can be selected? What are the various methods of selecting samples? Now, one method, students, is random selection, as I have already told you, through random number generators or through random number tables. So there are random number table books. There are algorithms which generate random number generators. So this is known as random selection of samples. Second is systematic selection. So systematic selection is when each sample is selected based upon sampling interval. Based upon a fixed sampling interval. Now, what is sampling interval, students? Say guys, now consider this example. Say there are 100 balances in trade receivables. टोटल जो कंपनी के ट्रेड रिसीवेबल्स हैं, से उसमें 100 balances हैं. The total amount in trade receivables is comprised of 100 balances. So it has been decided to take a sample of 5. So अगर 100 में से 100 डेटर बैलेंसेस में से मेरे को 5 का सैंपल लेना है, सो सैम्पलिंग इंटरवल इज 100 डिवाइडेड बाय 5, दैट इज 20. तो जितनी आइटम्स उस ट्रेड रिसीवेबल के बैलेंसेस को फॉर्म कर रही हैं, डिवाइडेड बाय द सैंपल साइज, दैट इज सैम्पलिंग इंटरवल से 20. सो आई वुड बी selecting every 20th item. So first item I would choose randomly, and then I would be selecting every 20th item. Say first item I have chosen item number 1, first balance, then I would be choosing 21st item. Then I would be choosing 41st item. So in this way, so that sampling interval is constant. So that sampling interval remains the same until all those 5 items are selected. So this is called as systematic selection of samples, systematic sampling, or you can also call as interval sampling also. So systematic sampling. So you understand the concept of sampling interval. So number of items which are forming that uh, population divided by sample size is the sampling interval. So if I have to choose out of these 100 items 5 items, then first item I shall be choosing randomly, and after that I will be choosing an item after considering the sampling interval. Like in this case, every 20th item would be chosen. So this is called as systematic selection. This is known as systematic selection, systematic sampling. Yes, guys, is this clear to you? And there is another term which is monetary unit sampling. So Priyanka, we will also go to your module also. These all things are taken from your module only. The same thing is written in your module. Not something else is written in your module. So we'll come to your module also. Okay. So monetary unit sampling is where sample size, selection, and evaluation results in conclusion in monetary amounts. So monetary unit sampling is where sample size and selection and evaluation. All these things are not in number, but these are in the monetary amounts. So this we can understand with the help of example. Now let us say total amount of trade receivables is 40 lakhs. You have decided, depending upon your professional judgment, that sample size of 4 is required to be taken. So what is sampling interval? It is, in this case, it is 40 lakhs divided by 4, because here we are using monetary unit sampling. So the amount, we take the monetary amount and divide it by sample size. So we get the sampling interval. So sampling interval is 40 lakh divided by 4. This comes to 10 lakh. So suppose these are the various balances forming part of 40 lakhs. So trade receivable balance, A company balance is 1 lakh, another trade receivable balance is 25,000, another trade receivable balance is say 50,000, and so on. So total of all these is 40 lakh. So in the second column, there are cumulative balances. So here 1 lakh, 1 lakh plus 25,000, 125 plus 50, 175 plus 5 lakh, 6 lakh 75,000. So this way. So the total of trade receivable is 40 lakhs. Okay. So how monetary unit sampling is performed? choose first sample randomly. फर्स्ट सैंपल आपने 1 लाख और 40 लाख के बीच में, अगेन द मॉनिटरी अमाउंट. Now the distinguishing feature, the hallmark of monetary unit sampling is use of monetary figures only. So that is why its name is monetary unit sampling. Because it is a type of value added selection, because it gives weight to values instead of numbers only. It gives weight to values and selects samples on the basis of values, on the basis of monetary values. Okay. Say I choose any number between 1 to 40 lakh. Say I have chosen 1,50,000. So where does this number fall? 1,50,000. It falls here in 1,75,000. In cumulative balance of 1,75,000, this number 1,50,000 is falling. So first sample, this sample I have chosen randomly. Then I add sampling interval to this randomly chosen number. Okay. So what was my sampling interval? Sampling interval was 10 lakh. Okay. And now 10 lakh plus this figure. Now this is here. This is in this figure cumulative 13,75,000. And then I again add this figure to sampling interval. Then it comes to 23,75,000. Where does this fall? This falls here. So this sample is chosen. So on. So it helps students. This method helps in choosing those values which are higher in amount. So the audit effort is directed towards high value items. So this is the one of advantage of monetary unit sampling. So haphazard sampling, students. So haphazard sampling means the auditor selects samples without any technique. But he does not promote bias. He chooses to avoid bias or predictability. He doesn't choose samples in a way that it is clear to the staff of the company that samples being chosen are following certain pattern. Like if I start checking, if I start choosing sample of every first invoice of a month, then obviously the staff knows that that I am choosing a predictable sample. So this is to be avoided in all cases. Predictability is to be avoided. Bias is to be avoided. So haphazard sampling, it is an example of non-statistical sampling. Earlier three, random selection, monetary unit sampling, and systematic sampling, these were example of statistical approach. Now this is an example of non-statistical sampling. So when the auditor uses a sample, say randomly, but he without any structured technique, but he should select such a sample without any bias or having a predictability element. Okay, students. And last is block sampling. So block sampling means choosing a block of block of contiguous items. Say I choose first 200 invoices. So this is an example of block sampling. So this technique of sampling is also ordinarily not used in audit sampling, and obviously it results in some bias, and it has difficulty in providing valid inferences from the samples. So this is also an rather example of non-statistical sampling. Yes, guys. Clear to you guys? So methods of sampling we are done with. And we'll take a short break of 5 minutes, guys, and come back after 5 minutes. Yes, short break of 5 minutes. So welcome back, students. So students, once auditor obtains the samples, once he has selected the sample and applied the procedure, then he would investigate the nature and cause of any deviation or misstatements. So if sample relates to tests of controls, if it relates to controls, then he would find out reasons for deviation, and if it relates to tests of details, then obviously he would find out about reasons for misstatement and their possible impact on audit. Okay, and whenever he finds an anomaly, because anomaly is an aberration, so obviously he would try to make it sure that in fact it is an anomaly, that it is not representative of the population as a whole. Okay, so after sample has been selected and procedure has been applied, so the auditor would he would find out the reason for any deviation or misstatement. Remember again, deviation in case of controls, in case of tests of controls, and misstatement in case of tests of details. So student, again I am emphasizing this point. Always remember in your mind that the word deviation is used in the context of controls, and whereas term misstatements in audit sampling is used in the context of tests of details. Okay. And projecting misstatements. Now say in case of test of details, the auditor has got a misstatement. He has tested a sample and he has found some misstatement. So what he would do now, the next step for him would be to project this misstatement which he has found in the sample to the whole of the population. So this is the same thing, students, which we had learnt in this example. In this example. So students, here also we had learned that auditor had found a misstatement of 1800 in a sample, three invoices. In three invoices, uh, in a sample of 50 invoices. Okay, so he had found a misstatement of 1800. But this is the result of his sample. So now he would be extrapolating, he would be projecting this misstatement to whole of the population. So how he would uh, project this misstatement into the population? Like here, here we had seen that misstatement amount was 1800. So what was the sample monetary amount from which misstatement was found? It was 50,000. Okay, so 1800 divided by 50,000, and what was the total sales? Sale was total 1 crore. So actual misstatement he has found is 3,60,000. Okay, so after finding a misstatement, he has to project it to the whole of the population from which sample is drawn. Clear, guys? So this is the meaning of projecting misstatements, which we had done earlier while understanding the meaning of tolerable misstatement. So for tests of details, project misstatements found in the sample to population. So the auditor is required to project misstatements for the population to obtain a broad view of the scale of misstatement. But this projection would not be sufficient to determine an amount to be recorded. So, because it would always be in the nature of projection that such a misstatement is likely, it would always gives you the evidence that such a misstatement is likely. But what is the actual misstatement, that actual amount which was to be recorded, that it is not likely to find out, because that is not its job, that is not the nature of sampling. Okay. And for tests of controls, as for and students, you have to remember, for tests of controls the projection of deviation is not required. Projection of deviation is not required. Why? Because in tests of controls, what is the deviation rate in sample? It is the deviation rate in the population. It doesn't require a projection, because monetary statements, because in tests of details, misstatements are in monetary amounts. That is why their projection is required. And after that, the auditor has to evaluate the results of sampling. So he would evaluate the results, and he would see whether the use of audit sampling has provided a reasonable basis for him to draw the conclusions. Okay. Like for in case of tests of controls, if there is high sample deviation rate, it means that assessed risk of material misstatement may now be more than was initially what was planned. So obviously more substantive checking needs to be done. And for tests of details, if there is some unexpectedly high misstatement, then the auditor, then it may lead him to the conclusion that the transactions which he is checking is materially misstated, unless there is some evidence to the contrary. Unless he finds something else. Otherwise, on the basis of conclusions drawn from his samples, he would conclude that this particular balance of which he had taken the sample, this balance is materially misstated. If actual misstatement is significantly more than tolerable misstatement. Okay. Yes, guys, clear. So now we quickly also go through your module. So now we are in your module at page 4.45, students. At page 4.45. Now scope of SA 530. So SA 530 becomes applicable when auditor has decided to use audit sampling for performing audit procedures. So this is the foremost thing which we had learned today, that SA 530 would become applicable only when the auditor has decided to use audit sampling for performing audit procedures. And remember, students, that audit sampling is used for both for tests of controls as well as for tests of details. It is not only used for tests of details only. It is used for tests of controls as well. Rather, it is more important in case of tests of controls because practically it would not be possible for auditor to check 100% of controls. किसी कंपनी में किसी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में इतने सारे एरियाज हैं, इतने सारे कंट्रोल सिस्टम्स हैं, so it would not be possible for the auditor to always check 100% of controls. So obviously he would be using audit sampling. So always remember that audit sampling is used in tests of controls as well as in tests of details. Okay. So two type of sampling you have already read: statistical sampling and non-statistical sampling. So again, the definition of population, this we have already done. Now certain characteristics of population are also given, that population from which sample should be drawn, it should be appropriate to the relevant audit procedure, to the relevant specific audit objective. कि जो मैं assertion टेस्ट करना जा रहा हूं मैं उसी की पॉपुलेशन लूंगा ना, so it should be appropriate. So the population should be appropriate. Number 2, it should be complete. So population from which sample is to be taken, it should be complete. Only then I would be able to draw proper and valid samples from it. Okay. And reliability is also related to the same thing. That the data is not only complete but it is also accurate. Say if I am performing monetary unit sampling, then if the data at the first stage is inaccurate, there are errors in the data, then I would be reaching at wrong conclusions. I may be reaching at erroneous conclusions. So these are the general things, 3 points which he has to keep in mind. Sampling unit definition we have already done. Sample must be representative. Now this is very important. Now whether the auditor uses statistical sampling or non-statistical sampling, anything which he might use, the sample must be representative. This is the essential condition. Why this is an essential condition? Because it is only when the sample is representative, say in case of tests of details, then only he will be able to project the misstatement to the whole of the population. If the sample is not representative, then obviously he would be getting not meaningful results. So sampling process, again, the two things which I have been telling you, that this is performed on tests of controls and this is performed on tests of details. Again, both things remember. This is very, very important because sometimes we forget about tests of controls. So sampling is performed both on tests of controls and tests of details as well. For tests of controls, its purpose is to identify deviations from the control systems which have been put up by the management. And for the tests of detail, its purpose is to identify misstatements of the account balances and class of transactions. Okay. So here it again talks about the meaning of statistical sampling and now non-statistical sampling. So what we had learned in the meaning of statistical sampling, I am again revising it. I am again saying it. So statistical sampling we had learned, it had it has two distinguishing features. So what are those two distinguishing features of statistical sampling? These are random selection of sample items and the use of probability theory to evaluate sample results and measurement of sampling risks. These are two distinguishing features of statistical sampling. If auditor uses some approach which doesn't have both of these features, then it is called as non-statistical sampling. Yes, guys, clear? Yes, Priyanka. Now you are getting more familiar with these terms because we have already gained an overview. Yes, Priyanka Pandey, are the things getting clearer to you now? So some advantages of statistical sampling are given, that it is more scientific. There is no personal bias. So it is more useful where population consists of large number of items, say in very large companies. Okay. So it is more useful. These are advantages of statistical sampling. But again, non-statistical sampling, even this approach, students, I had told you that this is not to be looked down upon. The SA 530 gives equal importance to statistical sampling as well as non-statistical sampling, because it lays a greater it lays considerable emphasis on personal experience and knowledge of the auditor, because the auditor has knowledge experience of for a number of years, so he's in a position to select samples in a proper way. Although he may not be using some statistical theory, although he may not be using some statistical tool, although he may not be using probability theory to evaluate results, which may make the things more complex, even if he is doing it on the basis of his personal experience and knowledge, even then it is okay, provided that there is no bias, there is no element of predictability in choosing the samples. It is only then the samples would be representative of the population. Okay. So these are again the same things which we have learned. So again, advantages of statistical sampling: the sample selection is more objective, it is more scientific, the amount of testing sample size doesn't increase in proportion to the universe tested. So अगर आप स्टेटिस्टिकल सैम्पलिंग स्टूडेंट्स यूज कर रहे हैं, तो अगर 10,000 आइटम्स में से सैंपल लेना है या 50,000 आइटम में से सैंपल लेना है, तो सैंपल साइज कोई बहुत ज्यादा नहीं बढ़ता, उसका नेग्लिजिबल इफेक्ट पड़ता है. तो आप इतने सर्वेज देखते हैं, करोड़ों की पॉपुलेशन का सर्वे होता है और सैंपल साइज क्या होता है, इट वुड बी 20,000, इट वुड बी 30,000. ओके. So sampling process means sample design. This we have already considered, that while designing an audit samples, the auditor considers the specific purpose to be achieved. That what is the purpose of taking the sample and which assertion is going to be tested. and what evidence is going to be obtained by choosing a sample. So all these are the factors which are considered by the auditor in sample design. So stratification. So stratification we have already done in considerable detail. So stratification means breaking of a data into distinct groups. So stratification, when an auditor performs stratifications, audit efficiency may be improved if auditor stratifies the population by dividing into distinct subpopulations which have an identifying characteristic. So it is the same language, students, which is written in your module that I was using in summary. It was not something new. So the purpose was to make the things more condensed to you. Okay. So while performing tests of details, the population is often stratified by monetary value. So this also we had learned. This allows greater audit effort to be directed toward large value items because they have the greatest potential misstatement they may have greatest potential misstatement. So like we had taken, students, the example of trade receivables. So a company is having trade receivables between 1 lakh and 20 lakh. Then we divided the population of trade receivable into some distinct groups, say between 1 to 99,000, between 1 lakh to 5 lakh, between 5 lakh 1 to 10 lakh, and between 10 lakh 1 to 15 lakh, and between 15 lakh 1 to 20 lakh. So in this way we divided the population. So now after dividing the population, the auditor may check these greater value items more intensively. He may check all of those balances which are lying in high value items, and he may check less of those items which are lying in low value band. So this is the advantage of stratification. Okay. And another term is value weighted selection. Value weighted selection means, students, when sampling adds value wise weights, like we had understood in case of monetary unit sampling, where importance is given depending upon the monetary values. Okay, so it is an example of value weighted selection. So sample size. So obviously the auditor would determine a sample size which is sufficient to lower sampling risk. So the lower the risk the auditor is willing to accept, the greater the sample size would be. Or if I am comfortable with greater sampling risk, then obviously converse is also true. Then my sample size would be lower. So again, how to determine sample size? The sample size can be determined using some statistical formula, or depending upon auditor's professional judgment. Again, there is no fixture that you have to determine a sample size relying upon some statistical formula. It can be done both ways. Okay. So examples of factors influencing sample size. So this we have also done, like if there is increase in tolerable rate of deviation, what is the impact on sample size? Or if there is increase in tolerable misstatement, what is its impact on sample size? So all these things are written here, the same things. Okay. These are also examples of factors influencing sample size for tests of details. So the higher the auditor's assessment of risk of material misstatement, the larger the sample size. So अगर उसका रिस्क ऑफ मटेरियल मिसस्टेटमेंट ज्यादा है तो सैंपल साइज बड़ा होगा. अगर उसका रिस्क ऑफ मटेरियल मिसस्टेटमेंट कम है तो ऑब्वियसली उसको छोटे सैंपल साइज से भी कंफर्ट मिल जाएगा. सो सेम गाइस, सेम अंडरस्टैंडिंग. Now, an increase in tolerable misstatement will decrease the sample size. This also we had done. That if my earlier my tolerable misstatement level was say 1 lakh, and now my tolerable misstatement is 1,50,000. So my tolerable misstatement has increased. So I am even comfortable with greater value of misstatement. So obviously it would reduce the sample size. It will decrease the sample size. The greater the amount of misstatements the auditor expects to find, the larger the sample size. So it is also perfectly logical. If I expect to find greater misstatements in the population, obviously I would be needing more sample size. My sample size would definitely be larger because I would be comfortable uh, with a larger sample size, because larger sample size would assure that greater misstatements are found in the whole of the population. So when stratification of population is appropriate, sample size will decrease. When you students, when you do stratification, then obviously you are selecting samples from each strata. So all it would have impact in lowering your sample size, because you would be selecting samples from each group, laying emphasis on high value items. Okay. So generally, the aggregate of samples from strata will be less than the samples had the population been unstratified. So these are some of the factors. So selecting items for testing. So the auditor has to select items in such a way that each item has chance of selection. That he has to avoid bias. So what does bias mean? Sangeeta, you are writing, what does bias mean? Sangeeta, we are talking about bias since beginning. Bias means like something is favorite to me. Like I want to check. I am favorite. I am prone to checking first item of every month. So here in this case, I am not avoiding bias, but I am promoting bias. Why? Because I am disposed towards checking first item of every month of a certain account. So So therefore, the foremost consideration for selecting item for testing is that each sampling unit in the population has a chance for selection. So thereafter, there are sample selection methods. So all these methods we have already done, students. Random sampling, systematic sampling, monetary unit sampling, haphazard sampling and block sampling. So quickly हम इसको दोबारा से रिवाइज कर लेते हैं, इनका क्या क्या मतलब है. Random sampling, where the auditor chooses a sample randomly. Randomly means using either random number tables or using random number generators. Scientifically. So random sampling, students, always remember that this is a statistical sampling. Because the auditor is choosing the numbers randomly by using proven tables and random number generators. If he uses random sampling and evaluates the results of samples using probability theory, then it is an example of statistical sampling. And what was systematic sampling? Systematic sampling was when samples are chosen depending upon the sampling interval. So like say sampling interval is 20, then every 20th item is chosen. Or if sampling interval is 3, say, then every third item is chosen. So that is systematic sampling. It is also an example of statistical sampling. Provided again that the sample results are evaluated using probability theory. This is the second condition which has to be fulfilled before these qualify as statistical sampling. And monetary unit sampling, this is an example of value weighted selection where we give emphasis to monetary items. Like we had given that example of trade receivables, which consisted of say 20 items of trade receivables and excessively, and one item we selected randomly, and then by adding sampling interval we arrived at further items. So this also helps in choosing those items which are of high value. Okay. So haphazard sampling. So this is a non-statistical sampling technique. So here, in case of haphazard sampling, students, the auditor does not follow a structured technique to choose the samples randomly. He chooses a sample in a haphazard way, without on his choice, on his professional judgment. But in doing so, he avoids bias. He avoids his liking. And block sampling is like when you choose a block of items, say first 100 invoices. So 100 are contiguous items, but this block sampling is sparsely used. It is not used much in audit sampling because it promotes predictability. So these are these are the methods of choosing samples. So when you have chosen the samples, then obviously you would evaluate the results. If there are deviations, if there are misstatements, then you would see what needs to be done. In case of misstatements, these need to be projected to the population, and you would have to find out the likely misstatement. And if the misstatement which you have found on the basis of your sampling, if that is considerably high as compared to tolerable misstatement, then obviously you would be asking the management to identify the reasons for such misstatements which you have found in the samples, and to make adjustments in the financial statements. And if the management refuses to make the adjustments in financial statements, then obviously you would be seeing what is impact of all this on your opinion. ओके स्टूडेंट्स, तो अभी आपकी क्वेरीज देख लेते हैं स्टूडेंट्स, फटाफट क्या क्वेरीज भेजी हैं आपने। तो स्टूडेंट्स, ये आपको एक बार सुनने से दिमाग में कंसेप्ट्स एस्टेब्लिश नहीं होंगे, ये आपको 2-3 बार अच्छी तरह से पढ़ना पड़ेगा। यू वुड हैव टू रीड इट ट्वाइस और थ्राइस टू अंडरस्टैंड, टू रिमेंबर द टर्म्स, to understand the difference between one term and another term. So अभी तो आपको सिर्फ एक initial understanding हुई है. You have got only an initial understanding. When you would revise it 2-3 times, then the things would become more clear to you. Yes. Yes, Ashok Kharyal. You are again in related party. You are saying something about related parties. Is the concept of related party applicable to all entities? Yes, Ashok, concept, whenever an audit of financial statements is performed, independent audit of financial statement is performed, whether it is of proprietorship concern or partnership concern, the concept of related parties is applicable. The point of difference between a proprietorship, partnership, and a company's concern is that in case of companies, there is applicable financial reporting framework. There is schedule 3, according to which the balance sheet has to be presented. Whereas in case of partnership firm, although various accounting standards are applicable, there may be no such format. Okay, so but the concept of related parties applies in case of partnership concerns also. Because why? Because it is having impact on opinion. आपको ओपिनियन पे इंडिपेंडेंट ऑडिट ऑफ फाइनेंशियल स्टेटमेंट्स का ऑब्जेक्टिव क्या है? to give report to which contains auditor's opinion that financial statements are free from material misstatements. This we had studied in chapter 1. So अगर कोई related party transactions हैं, if there are some related party transactions which may have an impact, such relationships or such transactions which may have impact upon upon the opinion of auditor, then obviously auditor has to see it. So even anyways, whenever an independent audit of financial statements is undertaken, standards on auditing apply. And SA 550 is one of those essays. Okay. Ashok, I hope the point is clear to you. And you are saying do all the work aspects the external auditor has to do should be performed by internal auditor. What you are trying to say, Ashok? Do all the work the external auditor has to do should be performed by the internal auditor? No. No, it is not that way. So, Ashok, internal auditor would be concerned about three things. He would be concerned about governance aspect, he would be concerned about risk management aspects and internal control processes. While doing so, internal auditor may perform some of the procedures which are also performed by the external auditor. But his job, the internal auditor's job is different from external auditors, although he may be using some of those procedures. Because these procedures are of audit nature. That is why he is using it. Because internal audit is also an audit, but its objective is different, its scope is different, and internal auditor is not asked to give an opinion on the financial statements. He is not a person independent of the entity. Okay. Yes, Ashok, is the point clear to you? Yes, Suman Goel, you are writing essay के नाम स्पीच याद हो गए हैं. Yes, Suman Goel, great. अगर आपको मैंने आपको स्टार्टिंग में स्टूडेंट्स बताया था, अगर आपको essay का नाम प्रॉपरली याद है तो कई बार ये एग्जाम में आपको हेल्प करता है चीजों को लिंक करने के लिए. जैसे essay 315 का नाम है, वो अगर आपको पूरा याद है तो आपको पता है उसके अंदर क्या क्या चीजें हैं. ये ओवरऑल चीज दिमाग में रखनी बहुत जरूरी है. Yes, Anmol Patwa, you are saying in audit sampling it may happen that one material. Yes, this is why, this is what the risk is all about. This is what sampling risk is all about, Anmol. That sample may not be representative of the population, that the auditor may reach erroneous conclusion. Okay. Yes, Anmol, I have already answered. And Faizan, you are saying, but how control is sampling risk? No, control is not sampling risk, Faizan. Are you understanding the class? Are you attending the class for the first time, Faizan? Control is not sampling risk. Control is the system established by the management which ensures that organizational objectives are met, that the company is able to carry out its business effectively and efficiently. Okay. So this we had done in chapter 3. Faizan, it's better you see the videos of chapter 3. Oh, Manish Kumar, you are saying audit efficiency is a part of audit risk. No, Manish. Audit efficiency is not a part of audit risk. Audit risk relates to that auditor might express an inappropriate opinion. Audit efficiency relates to how he performs his work, how an auditor performs his work. Say if I am taking more time to perform a work than is required because of some wrong procedures, then obviously my efficiency would be decreased. So audit efficiency is not part of audit risk. Rather, audit effectiveness is, because it impacts auditor's opinion. ऑडिट एफिशिएंसी डजंट इम्पैक्ट ऑडिटर्स ओपिनियन. उसको काम दोबारा करना पड़ेगा, उसको टाइम ज्यादा लगेगा, लेकिन ओपिनियन तो फिर भी वो ठीक देगा. सो जबकि ऑडिट रिस्क में हमने समझा था कि ऑडिट रिस्क का मतलब है इट इज ए रिस्क दैट ऑडिटर मे गिव एन इनअप्रोप्रिएट ओपिनियन. सो ऑडिट एफिशिएंसी पे अगर कोई नेगेटिव इम्पैक्ट पड़ता है तो उससे ऑडिट ओपिनियन पे इम्पैक्ट नहीं पड़ेगा. Yes, Manish, clear to you? Yes, Priyanka, you are saying if compliance is not followed by management while preparing financial information, then sampling is effective. While yes, that is also one of the risk factor. If say management is non-compliant, then obviously there are more chances of then control risk is increased, and there are more chances of errors. So it could have an effect on sampling as far as like sample size may have to be increased because the controls are not at first place effective, or say the management is non-compliant. So it is also an indicator of controls not being effective. यस ममता, जैसे एज आई हैव टोल्ड यू, आप इन चीजों को बार बार पढ़ेंगे तो आपके दिमाग में एस्टेब्लिश होंगी, एक बार से नहीं होंगी. यस मनोहर यादव, यू आर सेइंग बट अर्लियर वी हैव लर्नड that audit risk does not include the risk that auditor draws wrong conclusions when they are not. No, that is why what I am trying to say is, so मनोहर, ये आपको सैम्पलिंग रिस्क के बारे में जो ऑडिट एफिशिएंसी और ऑडिट इफेक्टिवनेस के बारे में बताया गया, ये दो आपको इरोनियस कंक्लूजन्स बताए गए हैं. एक टाइप का कंक्लूजन जो ऑडिट इफेक्टिवनेस से रिलेट करता है वो तो ऑडिट रिस्क का पार्ट है, और जो दूसरा कंक्लूजन ऑडिट रिस्क जो ऑडिट एफिशिएंसी से पर्टेन करता है वो ऑडिट रिस्क का पार्ट नहीं है. उसमें ये नहीं लिखा कि सैंपलिंग रिस्क के ये दो मतलब है. उसमें ये लिखा है कि सैंपलिंग रिस्क दो टाइप के इरोनियस कंक्लूजन्स को लीड कर सकता है. That sampling risk can lead to two type of erroneous conclusions. One has an impact on audit effectiveness, one has an impact on audit efficiency. So the one which is having impact on audit effectiveness, it relates to audit risk because it relates to expressing inappropriate audit opinion. Whereas another factor which relates to audit efficiency, it is not part of audit risk, but this possibility can also be there. It can have an impact on how an auditor performs his work. So his costs may increase, his time may increase. So these kind of things. But anyway, he would give appropriate audit opinion. Yes, Manohar, आपको clear हो गया? Yes, Vandana, rate of deviation, yes. It is a judgment by the auditor also, and it can be statistically determined also. Yes, Srinivasan, you are saying, please give an example of tolerable rate of deviation like you did for misstatement. So Srinivasan, you have to understand that for misstatement, we had given that example because misstatements are required to be projected to the whole of the population. Whereas when you test a control, then what is the control in the sample? It is the what is the rate of deviation in the sample? It is the rate of deviation in the population. It doesn't need to be projected. Yes, Manish, anomalies we do not project, we do not extrapolate, because these are not demonstrably representative of the population. Yes, moreover, systematic sampling and monetary unit sampling belong to statistical sampling, provided they meet both these conditions, that is, random selection and use of probability theory to evaluate sample results. Yes, Vishali, you are saying if auditor chooses a specific amount, say bill of 1 lakh above is taken as sample. 1 lakh above, okay, and no interval. So it is systematic or non-systematic or bias. So this is not sample at all. Vishali, if the auditor chooses a certain item depending upon its value, then it is a case of selective testing. If I choose to verify items of say rupees more than 1 lakh, then it is a case of selective testing. It is not sampling. So sample should have a characteristic that its results can be applied to the population. It has all the items in the population have a chance of selection. So this we have read at the beginning. I told you there are three methods of testing available to the auditor. He may check 100% of items, or he may check selectively, checking some items above certain threshold, above certain limit. Say what you are saying above 1 lakh. So this is a selective testing. Okay. So these are sampling methods which the auditor uses, Manish Kumar. Statistical sampling methods like random sampling, monetary unit sampling, and systematic sampling or interval sampling. Yes, Suman Goel, you are saying poll surveys are best examples. Sample usage. Yes, Suman. Bias, Sangeeta, I have already explained to you. Bayal Singh, you are writing size base or amount base. In which context you are asking size base or amount base? Bayal, amounts are considered, monetary amounts are considered in monetary unit sampling. Yes, Vaishali, random number generator. Number generator is an algorithm. It is a software. It is an algorithm which generates random numbers. So you want to generate any random number from 1 to 1 lakh, it would throw up you many numbers. Okay. Yes, Devraj, it is good that you have read well about sampling. So it would help you here also. Yes, Suman Goel, definition of related parties differs from entity to entity, but concept applied to all. Yes, Suman, you are right. Concept applied to all. Nagaraju, again, I am telling you, it is a slightly technical topic. So you need not get disheartened. You would not be able to understand all the things at the first go. So at least by attending this lecture, at least you have got familiarity with many terms, and you may have understood 10-20% of the terms. So even that is commendable. So when you read from the module, obviously your level of understanding would increase. Yes, Rito, you are saying if significant misstatements from tolerable misstatements, then can an auditor perform further test of detail? Yes, if actual misstatements are significantly more than tolerable misstatement, then auditor can perform further tests. He can perform. He would he may perform further tests to see number one, if his finding is correct, or if there is some evidence available which contradicts his sample results. So all things he can do. Yes, Vishali Bindal, if a CA has purchased some share of a company, this you would again be reading in company law classes. Anyway, if a CA has purchased shares of a company, then he can't be appointed auditor of the company because it is a threat to his independence. Who is a shareholder? Shareholder is the owner of the company. Okay. And anyway, such type of things are also expressly provided under provisions of Companies Act. Yes, Kalkotar Jeshbhai, these are tolerable misstatements are not something written in standards on auditing. These are set by auditor using his professional judgment or using statistical methods. Yes, Rahul, you are saying that I should tell you before this. That's a good idea, Rahul. So, guys, if you are able to read the chapter beforehand, okay, so that would be great idea. Okay, like when we will be starting next chapter on audit of financial statements. So you first audit of different items of financial statements, chapter 5. So you first try to gain an understanding of what the chapter is about. आप मॉड्यूल खोलें, जरा देखें कि उस चैप्टर में लिखा क्या है, इतना तो समझें, 10 मिनट लगा लें, 15 मिनट लगा लें, उसको इतना देखें कि what the chapter is all about. That's a good idea, Rahul. Yes. Sampling risk. Swati Krishna, sampling risk is present. Probably you can say it is intrinsic, it is inherent. It would be there. It would be there in any sample. Like a sort of margin of error. You can correlate it with that way. So because it is a sample, so sampling risk would always be there. So that is why we say that detection risk will always be there. It cannot be completely eliminated. Okay. So sampling risk would always be there. Non-sampling risk would always be there. We are talking about probability. Chances would always be there, na? Yes, Rituraj, you are saying that tolerable. Yes, Rituraj, you are very much right. Like Rituraj, tolerable misstatement is an application of concept of performance materiality. Okay. Yes, Suman Goel, you are right. right. Yes, Nagaraju. If you have not understood anything in the topic, you can ask the question again. You are welcome to ask the question again if you have not understood anything in the topic. So, but the point is that you have to put your own effort. That it can't be the case that everything gets clear to you just by hearing the lecture. Even if the things are clear to you, you will not be able to write even one line in the papers. For that, you would have to open the module and you have to establish the things in your mind. Okay, students. So, students, on Friday, what we shall be doing? We follow the suggestion given by Rahul Sharma. We shall be doing lot of questions, case studies, other questions. We shall be doing lot of questions relating to this chapter, chapter 4. So my request to all of you is just go through this chapter, chapter 4, and try to retain some concepts, try to retain some broad things. Okay, so we shall try to do some practice exercises, some descriptive questions, some case studies relating to chapter 4 on Friday. So it is going to be a very interactive session, students. So do come in large numbers and and try to enjoy the session. Okay, thanks a lot, students. Thank you.